This week I've got 2 movies, and of course, towards the end of the year, it had to be the hardest week of movies to review because I have Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker and Cats. I saw them both on the same day. They're both coming out on the same day. And I guess it makes sense because if you look at the Venn diagram of audience members for each, there's not like a huge amount of overlap, right? You're not like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Am I going to see Star Wars? Am I going to see Cats? And we're coming into the holidays, so let's assume you have time to see both. This will be a spoiler-free review of Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, so I'm only going to touch on a bit of it. I'll start there. It doesn't matter what I say for this movie, right? It doesn't matter. If you're a Star Wars fan, you're going to see this movie. Literally nothing I can say during this review would prevent you from seeing this film. So, let's just talk about it very briefly. It was safe. I think that's probably the nicest thing I could say about it. It was definitely safe, and I acknowledge there's no way to please everybody, as we saw from the last film. There was a little too much fan service in this one for me, and I say this as a fan, right? Like, I love Star Wars. Star Wars, I've loved since childhood. It is a huge part of my life. I'm such a fan, and so I want it to succeed. So too much fan service for me, and I'll say my real-world understanding of things like the fact that, like, Carrie Fisher wasn't available to film because she has passed, R.I.P., Princess/General Organa. You know, it made me more forgiving than I probably should have been. And the other thing with this is, like, this is the 9th film in a beloved saga. And I think if it wasn't, and it wasn't a Star Wars film, we would be ripping this to shreds. But it's not. And you have to acknowledge that, like, look, this is a Star Wars film. This is the finale. You know, all of those factors impact your viewing experience as an audience member. I don't think there's a way to review it independent of the rest of the franchise. So I think more than anything, I felt a sense of relief that this film is over and the Skywalker saga is over, and just, like, I need it to be done. Like, I'm glad that they're hopefully moving away from this trilogy format, because I don't think there's any way for each trilogy to live up to expectations. Like, I love Mandalorian because it's like, okay, cool, my expectations are somewhat tempered. I don't have to wait years and years in between movies, and so I don't, you know, my expectations cannot rise to a level that is unmatchable and you cannot satisfy. And it's me times every other Star Wars fan out there, right? So I think the nicest thing I can say is that it was a bow tie ending, and that's the best you can hope for. That's absolutely the best you can hope for. And I think if you look at, like, all the other reviews, we're all kind of saying the same thing. It just depends on how, like, angrily you want to say it. And I'm not trying to say it in an angry way. I'm at one with the Force on this one. And I'll totally say I cried. You know, I was happy at the appropriate times. There are plenty of parts I wish they, like, hadn't included, and that is applicable to probably every film aside from 4, 5, 6. But I felt weirdly like the same way I felt at the end of watching Lost, J.J. Abrams' other kind of opus to me, in that I just need it to be done. Like, I need to move on with my life. And not that I need to move on from Star Wars, but I need to move on from the Skywalkers. I think it accomplished what it needed to. I don't know if I 100% love the way it did it, but it did it. It was going to succeed as long as it didn't fail and fall on its face, and it doesn't fail and fall on its face. I'm not going to give it the highest of ratings, which pains me to do. Like, I really wish. And I don't hate it the way that, like, I really didn't like the prequels. But I just, you know, I don't love it, and I don't think anybody's going to ever go, Rise of Skywalker is my favorite one of them. And so I'm only going to give it 3.4 out of 5. The other film I have this week was Cats. And I feel like I can talk safely a lot more about this one because what in the what did I watch? Like, I know, much like everyone else, I saw the trailer, and I will say I've never seen Cats. I don't know anything about Cats except for the song Memory and the Kimmy Schmidt storyline jokes about it, which turned out to be more true than I was expecting. So again, I saw the trailer like everyone else. I went, what the hell? I'm so excited for this. I want it to be absurd. I want it to be like The Room. I want it to be like a Rocky Horror. Like, that was the best case scenario for this. No, I did not get that at all. I wanted it to be campier. I wanted it to be weirder. I will say, I think the most helpful framework for this, and this is a movie where I'm like, oh, if you loved the musical, because I went with somebody who was familiar with the musical and loved it, and they enjoyed it a lot, and I was like, great. So I think if you are already on board for this, it's fine. You're going to like it a lot. If you are totally repulsed by this, you're not going to go see this. Don't go see this. I do not recommend it. Now, if you're like me and you were on the middle and you're like, hey, the morbid curiosity is getting to me, this is where I think my review actually might help you out a little bit. Like, it's not as crazy. Maybe the first 20 minutes, it's comical to watch, like, the bizarreness of these. They're super creepy CG cats and, like, human faces on cat bodies, but they have hands and they have, like, human feet. And it's just, I have not been creeped out by CG like this since, I would say, The Polar Express. And that is quite an accomplishment in some senses. I wanted it to be weirder, and not in a good way, not in a, like, a this is freaking me out way. The most helpful thing, I think I was saying, is that it's just about cats. That's all it is. There is not more to this. It's just about cats. Don't try and delve deeper meaning from it, I would say. It is relentless. And apparently this is also similar to the actual musical. Apparently it's very similar, like to the stage production of it. It's mostly just songs that don't have a lot of transitions between, and the songs are just about cats being cats in the backdrop of London. This is as I say these words out loud, they are equally absurd to me. They certainly touted the cast, and you've got Francesca Hayward, who's like a newcomer. She plays Victoria. She's clearly a dancer. I think she does a good job in this for being a cat. I don't know how else to say it for being a cat. I don't know if it's her singing. It's not the strongest because you've got some heavy hitter singers in this. It's just, oh my God, the more I think about it, I'm like, did I actually watch this movie? In terms that you've got Idris Elba as McCavity. You've got Taylor Swift as Bombler. I can't even pronounce the names. Bomblerina. Judi Dench is Deuteronomy. Ian McKellen is Gus. Rebel Wilson is Jenny and Dots. James Corden is Bustopher Jones. Did somebody just put a bunch of half words into a hat and start pulling them out, and that's cat names? Like, this is somebody explain to me. Nobody explained this to me. I don't need it explained. It's just cat. It's just about cats. I think the big moment that I was waiting for was so Jennifer Hudson plays a cat called Grisabella, and she sings "Memory," which again is the only song I'm familiar with in this entire musical. It kind of fell short. Kind of fell short for me. I think she's a great singer, and I think she's a good performer, but it wasn't great. And if you have, I think the nice thing about the theater is even if you don't love the material and you don't love whatever, the kind of the show-stoppingness, the live action, the live performance part of it can still move you. And somebody had an excellent observation, like there weren't pauses for applause. There weren't breather moments for them to reset the set. There wasn't an intermission, and that felt missing from this. And it's missing from a lot of theatrical adaptations. Like, I'm interested to see how In the Heights does as a byproduct. Or you have to choose to adapt it to be more of a movie. And I feel like this was just a bunch of set pieces that happened to be taking place on a screen. And then finally, like, Jason Derulo's in it, and like, go figure. Cats. It's just about cats. And I do want to talk a tiny bit more about the CG and technical and visual aspects of it, because a lot of money went into this. How? I get the artistic choice to have, so they have, cat ears and human faces, and the cat ears move in CG. You can't see this, but I'm flicking my hand like a cat ear because they have a very distinct movement. And then all the dancers do these kind of, weird, cat-ish moves that I think would make sense in a stage show, but don't quite translate here. And then you've got these, like James Corden's cat, they're cat, again, I'm going to say cats 10 million times. I know they're cats, and I know cats are light, and, feline animation is just its own special thing because they defy gravity and they land on their paws and all that stuff. But these cats were too light even for what should have been what they were on the screen. Also, the scale of the cats changes every time. It just, each scene, it's hey, there's a car, and they're half as tall as a car, and then suddenly it's hey, there's a shrimp, and the shrimp is the size of their I don't understand who was paying attention to this. You had a completely made up set. You could manage this. You aren't constrained by a theater. And also, they kept sliding. Clearly it was on sounds. Parts of it were filmed on sound stages, and then it was superimposed onto a background. And they just kept the floor plane kept sliding, and that might be a too technical observation for folks, but it's freaky. And then at one point, oh my God, I'm sorry if this is a mild spoiler, but it's not really. It's just a visual thing. It's weird. So Taylor Swift and Idris Elba, most of the cats are very fit ballet-looking dancer cats. Those are very dancer bodies, but with tails and such. And then you've got James Corden, who's a super plump cat. You've got Rebel Wilson, who's a slightly larger cat, but not obese. Judi Dench's cat has this weird I don't even know how to do it. Judi Dench's cat may have freaked me out the most. But actually, no, Idris Elba's cat freaked me out the most because at one point they show Taylor Swift's cat, Bomblerina. And Taylor Swift, to me, as far as I can tell, is a very svelte, tall woman. And they kind of widened her cat. She looked thick. And then Idris Elba came out, and he freaked me out so much because it's this Ken doll effect, but he's kind of fit, but he's they've made him wide in that kind of old man chest wide way, but still fit. And it's just did he not have a say over this? And he didn't go don't make me so kind of, I don't know. It's a very disturbing effect. I don't understand. It's just a movie about cats. And also, I will say my biggest question at the end of this film, still having seen it, what the hell is a jellicle cat? This film just drops you in. It's something jellicle cats. And I'm what is one? We never find the answer as far as I can tell. And then this is a weird one. I think if you love Cats, you'll probably give it a 5 out of 5. And if you are like me and we're on the fence and we're just like, hey, I want to see what this train wreck is, it was not train wreck enough. And so I'm only going to give it 2.5 out of 5.